Have you found that you don't read as much as you used to? Or have you noticed lately that like there's a sense that you're missing out? You're just like procrastinating about everything. I think what you're experiencing is that you have become a victim to what I want to call the war on your attention. Hey everybody, welcome. My name's Pete and I'm one of the lead pastors here at Creekside, and you are joining us for week 3 of our series that we're calling Before We Lose Our Minds. And we've been talking about how this kind of time that we're in has this ability to kind of amplify things up and make us feel like we're on the direction or we're on the path of losing our minds. And so in week 1, we talked about the feeling of being overwhelmed and what to do with that and how we can take that feeling of being overwhelmed and actually place ourselves and root ourselves in the kingdom of God, and that can lead us into a type of peace, even in the midst of being overwhelmed. And then last week I talked about what do you do with other people? What do you do when other people are making you feel like you're losing your mind because they're putting out all these posts and these ideas that you disagree with or that you dislike? And so we talked about some shifts that you can make and how you see those and how you react to those that will keep you from losing your mind. And today what I want to talk about is something that I think affects like all of us. I think at least like 99% of us, this is causing us to lose our minds or be on the way to lose our minds. And here's how it manifests, or here's how it shows up in our lives. Let me know if this has been happening to you. Have you found that you don't read as much as you used to? Or if you do read, when you try to read, you find like I have trouble like taking in the information that I'm reading. Like as I'm reading, I'm flipping pages and I'm like, I'm 10 pages in and I don't even know what I've been reading so far. Or have you noticed lately that like there's a sense that you're missing out? Like it seems like everybody's doing really fun, exciting things and you see it online and you're like, I feel like I'm missing out. And there's like this anxiety about missing out. Or has this happened to you? Have you noticed that like you can pull out your phone just for a minute. You just want to look at my phone just for a minute. And you pull out your phone just for a minute and you click on one of those social media, you know, the big F, where you click on the Instagram or you click on the TikTok, and it's just for a minute. And then you just start, and this is just for a minute. And then you look at the clock and you've been there for like an hour or 2 hours. Like it just sucks you into like a time warp where time just keeps like accelerates way faster than you thought. Or have you noticed that like you don't watch movies anymore without being interrupted? Like when was the last time that you actually sat and you said, I want to take in this cinematic experience, and you put away everything else and you just looked at the screen for that hour to 2 hours and just watched the movie? Have you noticed that maybe it manifests itself in this way, that you're up late and your body's telling you it's time to shut down, it's time to go to bed, and you're like even falling asleep on the couch, but instead you just continue searching for entertainment. Like you just keep flipping the channels because you're just maybe one more interesting thing that I can just squeeze in to my day. Or have you noticed maybe this, that you no longer would ever just have a web browser, just one web browser open. Now you'll have tabs, and there's like growing tabs, and you can have like 20 tabs open all at once. Or maybe it's manifested itself this way, that you found that you're just like procrastinating about everything. Like you have trouble just getting anything done and your attention is so divided every which way. Or maybe it manifests this way, that you're just having trouble listening. Like right now, like we're like 3 minutes into the sermon and you're already not listening. Like, come on, listen to me, okay? Have you noticed maybe it manifests that it's just hard to listen to other people as they're talking in like human relationships that you have? If you've noticed any of this, I think what you're experiencing is that you have become a victim to what I want to call the war on your attention. And I don't want to comment on all the technology that I just listed. Technology, I think, is kind of like neutral. It can be good or bad. But what's happening through technology, and as technology becomes a bigger and bigger part of our lives, is that there is a war taking place between all of these different mediums and apps on our phone, and they are all warring for our attention. What they want is our eyeballs. And what they want is our attention and our focus, and they are finding clever ways to grab it. And what this does to us is it leaves us feeling pulled in every direction. It leaves us feeling like, oh, I'm going to check this out. Oh, I got a notification. Oh, no, I'm going to check this out. I'm going to check out this app. I'm going to look at this thing. And then we have all the other things that want our attention, like the physical things, like people in our lives that also want our attention. And it just leaves us feeling like we're never really in the present moment. We're always being pulled from one thing to another. And I think what it eventually does is it robs us of our peace. It robs us of our ability to focus, to think deeply, to use our minds. And instead, we're just kind of like people that are just looking for the next little piece of candy, the next little piece of entertainment that's going to come from all of these things that are vying for our attention. And so what I want to talk about this morning is, what do we do with this war on our attention before we lose our minds to it? Because most importantly, what this war on our attention is doing is it's making us unable to hear God anymore. It's taking away that space that people used to have in their lives where they would actually listen to the voice of God, where they would commune with God and be with him, and they would get discernment for their lives from God. But now that there's this war on our attention, that's been just made so minimal or so closed off, and now most of us don't even have that category in our lives anymore. And so what I want to challenge you to do this morning is to decide that you are going to win the war on your attention. Because you decide, ultimately, where will you give your attention? What are you going to give your attention to? I want you to decide right now, I don't want to be a person who's like being manipulated by these international companies that are all vying for my attention so that they can just sell me more stuff. I don't want to be like that. I don't want to be like their little guinea pig. I want to take my attention back. You say that? Maybe like nudge the teenager next to you who's on their phone right now. Like nudge them. Be like, let's take our attention back. Just throw your phone. Just take somebody's phone right now. Just throw it across the room. Okay, did you do that? Okay, we are not liable for any broken phones, but okay, you want to take your attention back this morning. And what I believe is that Christianity has many ancient practices that they have cultivated over time, that we have cultivated over time, that help us maintain and take our attention back and help us hear God's voice. And what I want to do this morning is introduce you to just one of these practices. And the one that we're going to look at today is called lectio divina, which is a Latin term that gets translated into a holy reading. And this practice has been around since about the 6th century, and it's taken on many different means and ways that it can be expressed and has developed over time. But basically, for us, as we experience it in 2020, it's a very slow, intentional way of reading through the Bible. And so what I want to do is walk you through a very practical way of engaging in this practice. But before we do, I just want to say one thing, that I know many different people listening right now, you may have all different ideas about the Bible. And there's only one thing that you need to believe, or at least accept the hypothesis of, in order to engage in this practice about the Bible. Then here's the one thing. Just believe that God uses the Bible to speak to us. You don't have to believe anything else about the Bible in order to engage in this, other than to believe that God, throughout history and throughout the witness of Christians throughout history, have said somehow God, by his Spirit, uses this book to speak to us. And so if you can wrap your head around that simple idea, maybe this is a way that God actually speaks to us, then you can engage in this practice. And so the practice is called lectio divina, and now we're going to dive into how it works. And it may not make sense until we get all the way through, but I'm going to give some examples and walk you through some different scenarios. So there's 4 stages to lectio divina, and we're going to break these down more, but let me just give you the 4 right now. There's the reading of the text, so you're going to pick like a small passage to focus on. And you're going to read it. Then there's the pondering of the text, the responding to it, and then meditation. And so here's what each of these mean. The reading, that you read slowly through your passage. And when a word or phrase jumps out at you, you stay there. You read it and you reread it. And you let it resonate within you. So this is not speed reading. This is not, how much can I read of the Bible to tick off of like, I read 5 chapters today. This is the opposite of that. This is like, how little can I like nibble at the Bible? How little do I need to be able to hear something profound from God? And so you pick a small passage, like a few verses, maybe like something that makes up a story, and you read through it slowly, and you're looking for a word or a phrase that jumps out at you. And then when you get that word or phrase, then you would move on to the next piece here, which is pondering. As you read and reread your passage, ponder it, ruminate on it, use your mind and your heart and your experience to think about it, and connect it to your own life and circumstances. So you're gonna get that word or that phrase, and you're just gonna, so when you're done reading after a little while, you're just gonna say, okay, I've read it. Now I just wanna ruminate on this word or phrase. And just say, I wonder why that stood out to me. I wonder if that maybe connects to my life somehow. I wonder if maybe God made that phrase or word stand out to me because he wants to say something to me through it. And so you're just gonna sit in silence, and just repeat that word or phrase over and over, and just kind of like mull it over, like you're chewing the cud, as they say about the cows. So that's pondering. Then next is responding. As the passage becomes real to you, share that process with God. Tell God whatever you're thinking or feeling. And this could be positive or negative. This could be like screaming at God, crying out to God, or it could be a gracious, like, thank you, God, for this revelation of this thing. But just talk to God about whatever he's speaking to you through the passage. And then the last stage is meditation. And this is interesting language. So if this catches you off guard, just go with it. But you may find yourself drawn into a timeless state of union with God. It's like that timeless state where you're on like social media and time just stands still. It's like that, but like with God. Like this timeless state where time just kind of like stands still and you're just in communion with God and you're in this like flow state. This is not something that you can dictate or control. It may grow out of the other stages or it may not. And it may last only a moment or for a lengthy time. But as you do this practice more and more, you may find that more and more you enter into this state where you're just in communion with God. And really, this can become the goal of this practice, is to get to these places where you experience like this taste of the presence of God. And sometimes it's just a moment, and sometimes it lasts for a longer time. But that's the 4 stages of lectio divina. And they work well if you're learning this process to go through them in this order, to begin by reading the passage, then pondering it, then talking to God about it, and then just meditating, which is kind of, you could think of it as like rest or just listening to God. It works well to go through them in this order, but the more that you do it, the more that you'll find that these are really just 4 stages and that you can bounce around them. So you can get to meditation and then you can go back to responding and then you go back to reading and really you just use the 4 stages and you kind of ping pong around all of them until you feel like, okay, I think that I'm done. And maybe you set a time limit for how long you're going to do this practice for. But I wanted to give you a really practical way that you could practice this at home. And I hope that you do practice it. But here's a really easy way that you could practice it. Pick your passage. So pick a couple verses. You're going to have to read something. You're going to have to read like more than you're going to end up doing the practice on, because you're going to have to figure out, okay, what's a story that I want to focus on, or what makes a passage like a concise kind of beginning and end of a thought. But you're going to pick a passage, then read it 2 times, and look for a word or a phrase. Just a word or a phrase that stands out to you. It could be anything. Who knows why it's going to stand out to you. And then you read it again, and you just ponder that word or phrase. And then you read it again, and then you're going to respond. And then you read it again, and then you're going to rest or listen to God. Really simple. Each one of these stages could just be a few minutes each and add up to 8 to 10 minutes. But I think that if you do this, that if you enter into this practice, that you'll find that something really like mystical happens, that actually God is speaking to you through this ancient text. That he uses these words and you're like, wow, like sometimes you do it with a story that you've known your whole life and you thought you knew every part of it. And God points out this part that you didn't realize was there before. And it becomes like this really meaningful piece to you. Or sometimes when you do this, it feels like, I don't know if I really got anything profound. But what's happened is that you have internalized a story or a passage. And you begin to carry that story or that passage around with you. And then later on that day or later on that week, something from that story or that passage resonates and it clicks and you're like, I'm so glad that I did this practice, this discipline, because I can see now how God is using it to speak to me. Imagine if you started doing this every day, if this was like a routine at the beginning or the end of your day, how this might begin to shape how you see the world, how you see yourself, how you see God, and the thoughts that you're carrying around in your mind. And imagine how this would shape your attention. If instead of just saying, my attention just goes wherever social media takes it. My attention just goes wherever like the day takes it. Imagine if every day you had a space in the day where you said, my attention is not up for sale. Like there is points in the day where I dictate where my attention goes. And I want to dictate my attention is going to go to the Word of God, to Scripture, because I believe that through that, God's going to speak to me. And that's where my attention needs to be. Because when I place my attention there, I'll find peace. I'll find peace in this crazy world that we find ourselves in. I wanted to give you an example also of a passage that I spent some time doing lectio on. And I've went through this passage many times in my life. And this is really kind of where like sermons come from. If you've ever wondered like, how do preachers get all this content for a sermon? Part of it's study, but part of it is just spending time listening to the text and listening to God speak to us through the text. And so I wanted to read for you a really simple story and then show you some of the things that stood out to me as I did lectio divina with this passage. And I did this several times, so this wasn't like in one sitting. This was over like the course of 2 weeks that I got some of these insights out of this passage. But here's the story. This is Jesus and his disciples, and they're on a boat. That day when evening came, he said to his disciples, "Let's go over to the other side." Leaving the crowd behind, they took him along, just as he was, in the boat. There were also other boats with him. A furious squall came up, and the waves broke over the boat so that it was nearly swamped. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. The disciples woke him and said to him, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" He got up, rebuked the wind, and said to the waves, "Quiet, be still." Then the wind died down, and it was completely calm. He said to his disciples, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" They were terrified and asked each other, "Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him." And so I took this passage, and this is an example of what a passage might look like, just a handful of verses that makes up this story. And I did that process that I just outlined, just spent some time like reading and then pondering, reading and then talking to God, reading and then just resting and listening to God and what he wanted to speak to me. And a few things popped out over my several times of doing this. And one of them was this line, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" And I read this passage many times in my life, and I've heard this story many times in my life, and this line didn't quite stand out. It was more like what happened after this line, because then Jesus gets up and he commands the wind and the waves to be still. It's like miraculous. And then he rebukes the disciples. He talks to the disciples, and those lines kind of become like the catchphrase for this story often. But this question, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" I was like, this stood out to me for some reason. I was like, God, why is this standing out to me now? And as I spent time meditating and talking to God about it, I realized what he wanted to say to me was that this is something that you often feel, and yet you never say to me. These are words that you often want to say to me, and yet you never do. This don't you care? Don't you see what's going on in my life? Don't you see that? And it was like God was nudging me to say, you can bring this to me. I'm not like too big. I'm not like going to be overwhelmed by your doubts or by your feeling like you're alone. And this was like a unique kind of like moment of permission to say, yeah, I can just ask Jesus, like, do you care? Do you see me? And so then I just began to like bring that to God and say, like, whatever I'm going through, like, I'm just going to ask this question, like, do you see me? Do you care if I drown in this situation that I'm in? And Jesus, in his response, of course, he's the Jesus who went to the cross for each of us. And so his response is like, what do you mean, do I care? Like, look at the holes in my hands, look at the scars on my back, look at the tears in my eyes that I've cried for you. Like you don't know if I care for you? And so it becomes this really honest moment where I can say, oh, God, like, I can ask this question and I can get this powerful response, and I realize, no, he cares. Even if it feels like I'm going to drown, I know that he cares. So that was one thing that stood out for me and became a really powerful moment of prayer and communion with God through this passage. Another one was this. When Jesus asked this question to the disciples, he says, why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith? And I've heard this story told before, and I've heard these lines read in a tone that made Jesus sound like he was angry. Like he was angry at the disciples, like, why are you so afraid? Don't you have any faith? Come on, how am I going to change the world with you bunch of bums? Like that was kind of always the tone that I read it in. But the Bible doesn't give us a tone. And so we kind of have to figure out what tone we're going to give Jesus when we read Jesus' words. And so as I reflected on this, I started to give it a different tone, more of a tone of like a loving friend who might say it this way to me, why are you so afraid? You still don't have faith? You still don't trust me yet? Oh, guys, there's so much more for me to show you. One day this will seem like nothing. One day you guys won't be afraid. One day, oh man, the faith that you guys are going to have. And that became something that I carry with me now. And whenever I'm going through something, I can hear Jesus ask that question, not in a condemning way, like I can't believe that you have weak faith, but more in a, Pete, come on, Pete, you still afraid of this? Come on. You can trust me. You can trust me. And it's changed how I see my relationship with God by focusing on this passage and focusing on this moment. And so I want to encourage you to actually try this week. And if you do, then let me warn you of something that's going to happen. You are going to find that this is very challenging. Not challenging because it's hard to do, but challenging because there is a war on your attention. And that war has left you with an atrophied attention span. And so even the idea of reading for many of you is just like, wow, I have to read the Bible. Like, oh, can't someone read it for me? Like it's going to be difficult. And if you get to the place where you actually try it and you have those moments of quiet, you're gonna think as you prepare for it, oh, I'm gonna have these amazing moments and God's gonna speak to me. But instead what's gonna happen is you're gonna start thinking about all these other things. You're gonna be thinking about what you gotta do later today. You're gonna be thinking about other sources of entertainment that you could be engaging in. And instead of communing with God, you're gonna feel this intense, like, I'm just so distracted, I can't even do this practice. And so if you feel that, if you feel like I'm not a person who can do this, I've heard many people say that over and over throughout my teaching of this sort of thing. People are like, I just don't think I'm the type of person who meditates or ponders. That's only because your attention span has been so badly atrophied. And so think of it this way. Think of it as you are training to regain your focus. So as you try to do this practice and it's hard, that just think of, no, I'm training, I'm getting better at keeping my focus on God. I'm getting better at learning to God. One monk said it this way to another monk who was trying to learn this. He said, man, I'm trying to do these practices and I feel like in a 25-minute session, I'm getting distracted 10,000 times. And the monk said to him, how wonderful, 10,000 chances to return to God. So look at it that way. Every time you get distracted, you're going to pull your attention back to God. You're going to pull your attention back to that word or phrase. You're going to pull your attention back to this practice. And every time you do that, you're returning to God. And the practice of doing that will become easier and easier as you do this more and more throughout your life. The other thing that you might experience is that you'll feel like nothing happened. I did the thing and nothing profound. I don't feel like God poured any amazing revelation into me. And when you have those moments, see it this way, that by simply engaging in this practice and saying, God, I want to point my attention to you. I want to give you my attention. That by doing that is an act of faith, and that God, by his grace, is using those moments to shape you. And oftentimes God shapes us in ways that we don't even actually notice. And it takes so long for it to happen and it's so slow that we only see it in hindsight. And so oftentimes engaging in a practice like this takes faith to do it. And here's a good metaphor to think of it as. Think of it as like you're placing yourself under anesthesia with the trust that the surgeon knows what to do. And so you're going to be under anesthesia. You're like, oh, I did the thing. I don't know if God's doing anything. And you just have to trust that by his grace, he is working. He's doing surgery on you and he is shaping you. And hopefully one of those things that you'll find is that he is reshaping your attention span and your ability to focus and your ability to hear and commune with him. But I hope that you'll actually do this, that you'll actually try to engage in this. And we've got a couple things in place to help you do this. One is that we're gonna be doing it in life groups this week. So if you're in a life group, great, you're gonna get exposed to this. And there's something really cool that happens when you do this in a group of people and you get to hear what the other people are hearing from God. And sometimes the things that they're hearing kind of reinforce something within you. And it's really neat to do in a group. And so if you're in a life group, great. If you're not, then you can go to our website, look for the life group link, and you can join one. And then the other thing that we're going to do is that this week in the devotional, on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I'm going to lead you through this exercise. And we're going to have 3 different passages, and I'm just going to lead you through it. It's going to be really simple, but hopefully if you need just that little extra kickstart and that sort of how does this work? What does it look like? I'm going to lead you through it. And so sign up for the Devo, and that'll be Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday this week. But here's the thing that you've got to decide is who's going to get your attention. Do you want to continue to live with that feeling that you have right now of that increased anxiety, of that increased inability to focus, to listen, to read? Do you want to keep going that way? Because that's the way that you're going to go if you don't take it back. If you don't say, I am going to have in my life places where I direct my attention toward God and I listen for his voice. And let me promise you this one thing, that if you do this, God is waiting for you. And who knows what he might have to say to you that might change your whole life, that might change how you're feeling right now in this moment. I encourage you to go and find out. Would you pray with me as I close this? God, we thank you for your faithfulness. We thank you that like a rushing stream, you are always coming after us. And God, I pray for many of us that we would turn our attention towards you, and that we would hear your voice, that we would feel your presence, and that it would keep us from losing our minds in this world that would love to take our attention and sell us something or bring us on a path that would not lead to the life that you created us for. Jesus, by the power of your Spirit, would you help us to do this? We ask these things in your name. Amen.